amazing to see. Now, Garland, welcome to the stream.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I feel honored.
I am so sorry to have you come on so late. I really appreciate your guys' patience there. We had actually, I'm not sure if you ever saw the Vault 7 press conference that WikiLeaks did with 55,000 people sitting there waiting, and then there was just this horrific audio interference, and no one could hear anything Julian was saying.
No, I didn't. But as a person who practices the philosophy of Zen, what I would say is we are on at the perfect time. We couldn't possibly be on at the wrong time. Whatever time I came on, it's the perfect time.
It must be the perfect time because we're both here, you're right. But we got our own little taste of that today, which was a bit of excitement, that interference. Okay, but it hasn't stopped us. As you say, we are still here. We're here together. And this is a bit of a role reversal for me to be interviewing you rather than the other way around. However, I'm really fascinated to know. I've read that you're an ACLU National Board member.
Yes.
And I've heard many people say, where is the ACLU on Julian's case? And I wanted to know, is it even, within the jurisdiction of the ACLU, given that Julian is not an American citizen, or could it become an issue for them?
Okay, a couple of things, and that's a very good point, and it's something that I have concern about. So, historically, if you look back, and that's why I'm kind of waiting to see what happens. If you look back historically, during the McCarthy era, the ACLU was pretty much missing in action until the end, and I feel like we're in McCarthy 2.0 right now. And Julian Assange is a big part of that. He initially wasn't, but he's a part of that now because everything's a part of that, a part of the whole new, Cold War 2.0. But I can't speak for the ACLU, but I am, so in the interest of transparency, I'm on the Maryland Board of Directors, and I'm also on the National Board of Directors. So I won't speak for the ACLU, but I'll talk about the ACLU a little bit. And I think it's going to be interesting to find out what happens because, of course, Julian Assange isn't here. He's not in the U.S. He hasn't been captured, brought by the U.S. But if he does, then, of course, there are First Amendment issues there that will be there. And the question will be, what position will the ACLU take? Well, I think it's because I'm on here, it's pretty obvious what my position will be as far as a board member. So I'm interested to see, we won't know until when and or if he's ever extradited to the United States, and they're attempting to prosecute him for God only knows what. But a lot of organizations in this country are going to have the same questions. I think the U.S. going after Julian Assange in a way, if he's ever extradited here, they'll kind of have a tiger by the tail. You can't hold on, you can't let go, because the question becomes, if they prosecute him, the cheerleaders for the government, which the Washington Post, the the New York Times, the major media, they're going to certainly have a quandary, because the question is, do they assist? Do they do what they've been doing and simply be mouthpieces, megaphones for the government against Julian Assange at their own peril? Or do they look in the mirror and say, what do we do? Do we go after this guy or not? So if they ever extradite Julian Assange to the United States, it's going to cause some very serious philosophical and legal problems for I would hope that the ACLU would act on behalf of the Constitution. That remains to be seen. I will assume that the organization will, until I see a reason not to. And of course, all of the other organizations will be facing the same question. Do they cut their own throats by, joining the government and going after Julian? And God only knows what would they charge him with anyway? Could the United States government, if someone, robbed a bank in Lisbon, could the U.S. say, okay, well, bank robbery is illegal in the United States, so we're going after you? So even if they argue that he violated some American law, which is really odd, but even if they try to argue he violated one of our laws, but he did it in another country, the U.S. wouldn't have jurisdiction anyway, so they'd be trying to prosecute something. I don't know. It's weird. You see where I'm going with that? I think everybody sees the rabbit hole that goes down legally, and they're probably a little afraid to bring him in because they'll be faced with some real questions they have to answer.
So then the question becomes, is that really the goal? is their goal really to bring Julian to the US, or is their goal just to break him down where he is?
I think that their initial goal was one out of desperation, and that was first and foremost, shut his mouth. I think that was it, because that's the biggest danger of Julian Assange, to the powers that be, is that he was exposing their treachery, exposing their lies, exposing what they were doing, exposing that not only were they not lying, but it wasn't an accident, that they know what they're doing, the inside mechanisms of power. And I think right now, the fact that they've kind of shut his mouth, at least maybe not WikiLeaks, is good enough for them. They may be happy with that. I don't really know if they want him, but I know they sure wanted to shut him up.
Because there seems to be some maneuvering from Lenin Moreno right now, as in this vote that they tried to have yesterday about, taking the first step towards denaturalizing Julian from his Ecuadorian citizenship. There does seem to be maneuvering that is leading towards some kind of handover. Lenin's constantly talking about having negotiations with the UK, et cetera, but nobody really seems to know where it gets to. I think you're absolutely right about your analysis of when Julian comes to you, or if Julian was to come to US soil, whether that would be the turning point that a lot of the domestic organizations in the US, including media organizations, would have to face that question of, are we cutting our own throats? Are we next? If we let this guy go down this way. However, we don't want to see Julian go anywhere near the US with a 10-foot pole. We being those, certainly his mother feels that way, because we simply don't trust them to have him in his custody for even in their custody for even 5 minutes. I know John Kiriakou on a previous vigil agreed that should Julian be handed over by Ecuador to the UK, that every alphabet agency in America would be on the first plane to London.
Right.
And so really that's what we're trying to prevent with this effort and with Unity for J. I am really interested, given you seem to be in a very rare position with your media show with Stranahan, with Lee, where you are openly displaying opposing political views and yet working together in a congenial fashion to advance particularly anti-war causes. But it's very reminiscent of what we're doing with Unity for J. And given some of there's been a lot of opinions shared today already about why different people think that the Unity platform is important. But I'm interested to know for you, what gave you the guts to do that? Because you could have, especially your ACLU affiliations and everything else, you could have taken a lot of flack for working with someone of differing opinions.
Well, I'm accustomed to taking a lot of flack. I was in law enforcement, and I was on the board of directors of the ACLU while the ACLU while we were suing, pursuing legal action against numerous law enforcement agencies. And of course, now being a very left-leaning person, a regular on Fox News, so it's not abnormal for me. I feel like this. If you believe something, look, you only go around once as far as I'm concerned. If you believe something, you might as well say what you believe. One thing we know that the other side is powerful. We know that they are apathetic. I always put it like this. The neocons, the neoliberals, they are apathetic about the truth. And here's what I mean. A liar is kind of easier to deal with because they're kind of consistently lie. A person who's apathetic, or a group or organization who's apathetic about the truth, will say anything to achieve their end. And they don't care if it happens to be true, that's fine. If it's not true, that's fine. And that's what we're up against. And I feel that it's important for people who have a voice, who have a platform, because, I do the show on Sputnik. I also do a weekly show on the Pacifica affiliate, WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. And of course, I do a lot of other television stuff. And if you have an opportunity, you have to say what you believe in. I feel like this, the other things I do. If at one point I say something and every media outlet I work for, get paid for, everything else says, okay, that's it, Garland, you're fired. You said the wrong thing. Well, I'd still have to say it, because the only reason that I have any success, notoriety, whatever you want to call it, in my broadcast journalism career is because I've said what I believe. So I don't think if that's, you got to dance with whoever you went to the prom with, from one perspective, you know what I mean? That's always worked for me, from my personal perspective. The other thing is, it's the only thing I know. And I think what people, I respect people who go online, who, whether it's, or go on the news or TV or whatever, and they say what they believe. Even if it's wrong, at least they believe it. That's what I respect. And that's all I try to do. And I don't really know another option. In fact, if someone said, well, Garland, we're going to give you $1 million, but you have to say some things that you don't quite believe, I wouldn't get a dime. So I could, because I can't do it. So I'm caught up in the moment. It's a Zen thing. I'm talking now. I'm caught up in what I'm saying and ensuring that I say that what I believe. I can't control what happens later, or if I get fired or attacked, or for all I know, I might drop dead of a heart attack 5 minutes after this broadcast is over. But I know during that broadcast, I said what I believed, and I think more people should do that.
So it's about that purity of motivation.
Exactly. And see, the thing about it is this, because over the course of history, in the battle between the water and the rock, the water wins every time. So why? Because it doesn't give up. It keeps going on and on and on and long. So the people who stand for what they believe in, and over the course of time continue to do that, victory is on their side. Time is on our side, and eventually we'll win. If you think back, being a Black American, I've read books from people who were fighting for civil rights in the year 1900, in the 1890s. They had no prayer of getting any kind of civil rights legislation in their lifetime. But they did it because that's what they do. So I think one of the things that we have to do as broadcast journalism, and this is the way I put it, you don't fight to win. You fight because you're a fighter. If you understand what I'm saying, you fight because that's what you do. You hope to win. You push to win. You push to get what you want, but you fight because that's what's in your core. And I think the people that are on tonight, that are taking our Saturday night, there's nothing else. So I take a Saturday night, I could be doing something else. Look what Julian Assange is going through. It's the least I can do. But we all have to do this because this is what's in the core of our being. And that's who I am. And, Lee's on next. I know Lee, that's who he is. And I think the people that are coming on and pushing for more transparency here, that's what we need. That's what Julian pushes for, transparency. We're pushing for transparency. We're saying, where is he? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What is your claim against him? How is it valid? We're asking valid questions. And we're not getting the answer, and that's all he did, and that's all we're going to continue to do.
Yeah, and why are you accusing other countries of human rights violations when you're violating the rights of this human right in front of all of us, in the middle of a so-called civilized nation?
Exactly. And it's understanding that the questions that we're asking oftentimes, so when you ask that question, why are you doing it, are the questions I just posed. I think one of the things that people listening have to understand, that those are rhetorical questions for us, and those are rhetorical questions for our listeners, because the powers that be, the people that are pursuing Julian Assange, they already know the answer to the questions, and we do too, really, because he's a threat to their power, because transparency, their power is in their anonymity. Their real power is in that people don't know what they're doing, and that's his threat. So every time he exposes something that the CIA is doing, if he exposes something that the MI6 is doing, the FSB is doing, they get a little weaker every time we know what's going on. So their power is in their anonymity. So as we continue to research, to expose what we find out, we continue to do, his spirit, the spirit of fighting back against the system, the Julian Assange's spirit alive. And I'm not saying that like he's dead. I'm simply saying they've, kind of stopped him as an individual, but they haven't stopped him as a movement. You know what I mean? Right now, as an individual, they've shut him up, but they haven't shut him up as a movement. So as long as we're continuing to do that, the Julian Assange movement is alive and kicking, and they can't extradite the movement to the United States or anywhere else.
Yeah, it's the deniability that I was talking about with Anne Garrison. Is exactly the same thing as the anonymity that they hide behind. He destroys their deniability completely. Tech is just saying there's a sound issue.
Uh-oh, yeah, I hear a little bit of a sound issue.
Is it with my mic or is it with the stream?
I don't know.
Only from my mic.
Oh, there you go. You're clear as a bell now. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
really?
and so for those of people that hear the Garland Nixon, I'll give you like the 1 minute version, because people are probably like, Garland Nixon, who's this guy and why is he on? So basically, I was in law enforcement for 20 some years. I retired as a major. I was the commander of investigations division, and I was an investigator and all that kinds of stuff in my law enforcement career. Then I've been involved with the ACLU. I've been doing radio on Pacifica since 2006. I've been doing radio with Sputnik for about 1.5 years with Lee Stranahan, and all of the Fox News shows. I've been on all back Bill O'Reilly, you name it, for many about 10 years. I've been going on that there. And I am a person, very left-leaning person, but what I believe in, what I oppose, first and foremost, is injustice, and that is my motivation for everything I do journalistically. And of course, that's my motivation for supporting Julian Assange, because the ultimate injustice is what they're doing, which is a mass book burning. This is the mass censorship.
Oh my God, yes.
It is. Because this is not an attack on Julian Assange at all. And this is really an attack on us. It's the people in charge, the elite class, saying, look, you don't need to hear what this person is saying. You don't need to hear that. We feel threatened if you hear what he has to say. And remember, he's not really saying that much. Julian Assange is pointing us in the right direction. Julian Assange isn't one to say, hey, look, I know the answers, therefore you should listen to me. He's not doing that. He's saying, look, here's some information. Look into it, use your own knowledge and intellect and abilities to decipher it and come up with what you want. Here is the information. And a good journalist wants information. They want all the data that they get so they can sift through it, they can connect the dots, and they can make some sense. But if you look at what's going on in the BBC, CNN, in all of the Western media right now, media is not even the word we should be using anymore. We're still using the term media to refer to something that isn't even close to being a media. That is nothing but a megaphone for NATO, for the EU, for various governments, for various trade agreements, for international corporations. So we're even using the wrong term when we refer to these people as the media. We see people go on the BBC and get castigated simply because, good thing I didn't say castrated, oh God, I said it now, but you get my point. They get attacked simply because they literally, they're attacked because they oppose the government premise. They're told, well, you've gone against what the government's saying here. As if now in the media, that's now a crime. There was a time when you got a pat on the back for that. Well, good work. You're looking into what the media does. Now that's unacceptable. So what can we call this thing? Julian Assange's media. They are not media.
Yeah, I just completely agree with absolutely everything that you said. And you're so right that he's not one to be like, look at me, I've got all the answers. He's one to be like, look at the documents, we've published them all. It's like totally different thing. And you see the smears against Julian is so uniform to the smears against the other whistleblowers. They called Chelsea Manning a narcissist. They called Edward Snowden a narcissist. They called Julian Assange a narcissist. But the narcissists are not those who are exposing the crimes. The narcissists are those who are committing the crimes.
Exactly. And so what we end up with is a very dangerous situation where the elite ruling class, we can use all kinds of terms, but I'll call them the elite ruling class. They've created an economic environment of desperation. So you have people who they don't have time to research. There were, we hear, there was 150,000 new jobs created in whatever country, right? Well, the bottom line is that's only really 50,000 jobs because they pay so little. People have to have 3 to make it work, right? So the people are struggling and they don't have time to research. The only thing they have time to do is come in and turn on CNN or the BBC or whatever and hear the propaganda they're telling them. So they create desperation. So the people don't have time or the strength when they do get through working their multiple jobs to look into things, and you're tired. And then they carefully craft the message and hand it to you. And so the dangerous situation we have is that there are a lot of people who really, if they knew better, would be our allies, who are so misled. We can't fault them for being misled, but the bottom line is, sadly, they are our adversaries out of ignorance. And that's the dangerous part about this, about the times that we're in now. That's why it's important for us to continue to get the message out, to continue to write the articles on, you know, Consortium News and Mint Press News and antiwar.com and all these great sites that we have, and with what you're doing, to continue to go on Twitter, you know, to fight the good fight until such time as we get shadow banned or whatever the case may be. But it's important for us to do that for every single person who's watching this, every single person who watches it later, who sees the stream now, to, you know, do a little something, you know, retweet an article from one of the sites that I mentioned, to do something to try to spread the message. Believe me, it makes a difference.
Absolutely. And tomorrow we have our second Unity for J Day. So first Saturday every month we have these online vigils, and then first Sunday of every month we have what we call Unity for J Day, hashtag Unity for J Day on Twitter. And that's a day where supporters of this movement all around the world go and take any action whatsoever that they can to spread the message about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks' importance of his human rights, press freedom. We had last month people doing banner drops off motorway overpasses, like freeway overpasses. We had people chalking all over pavements and walls and, you know, basketball courts and like in cities all around the world. We had people printing out bookmarks that said Unity for J and putting them in books at the library. We had people pinning posters to, you know, laminating posters and pinning them to trees. We had people putting posters inside their car windows and then just driving around the city all day. We had all these amazing actions, and it's just everyday regular people are doing this, and it's just, to me, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm very happy to see this decentralized action, because I feel like this methodology is so much more difficult for those who oppose Julian and WikiLeaks to contain. Like, if we all just go and stand in one place, you know, in the city square, it's very easy for them to surveil us, very easy for them to infiltrate and to erode the movement. But when you have, you know, people in 1,000, 10,000 different locations doing 10,000 different actions, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I think that it also increases the audience size, because, you know, one person driving around one city with free Julian Assange on their car, and, you know, can impact tens of thousands of people in a single day. Actions like that, I think, is so important, and I love to see that type of thing happening now. I'm going to hand over to Garland. You've just talked about the importance of continuing to spread these messages, and now I'm passing the baton to you guys. I know you're going to do a great job of it. So, Garland, and Lee, hi Lee, and bye Lee.
Well, look, at the end of our half hour, hopefully you'll kind of step in and help me transition over, because I don't necessarily know where to click.
We're not really going anywhere. I'll be off camera, but we're right here with you. We're
wonderful,
here.
wonderful.